Hey there, welcome to Sleepy History Secrets, the channel where history sharpens its sword, but the voice stays calm. Tonight, we're exploring the entire history of the samurai, a journey of 800 years where silence was strategy, loyalty was currency, and occasionally paperwork was deadlier than war. Before you settle in and get cozy, take a quiet moment to like the video or subscribe, only if you truly enjoy falling asleep to humanity's more organised bad decisions. And when you're ready, drop a comment telling us where you're listening from and what time it is right now. It's oddly comforting to know how many of us are awake at the wrong hour, each in our own little corner of history. Now dim the lights, maybe let a fan hum softly in the background, and let's wander gently into Japan, a place where honour once had an accounting department, and where the word samurai didn't mean warrior at all, but simply one who serves. If your mind drifts while we travel through the centuries, that's perfectly fine. History will wait for you. It always does. So, let's begin. In a capital so elegant it forgot to defend itself, and in fields so far away that the farmers started hiring their own protection. You begin in Heian, modern Kyoto, in the year 794. It's a city of poetry, moonlit screens, and people who find new ways to write about the sound of crickets. The emperor has moved here to start fresh, to build a new capital free from the ghosts of the old one. He succeeds in making something beautiful and utterly defenseless. Far from the marble courtyards and incense smoke, Japan's provinces grow restless. The government's tax collectors are late, the roads crumble, and somewhere between Kyoto and the rice fields, the state simply evaporates. To fix this, aristocrats do what aristocrats always do. They hire someone else to worry about it. Temples, noble families, and wealthy officials begin establishing private estates, called shuun, little autonomous zones immune to imperial taxation. They put them under the protection of the court, which is another way of saying the court has officially given up control. Monks pray, nobles host poetry contests, and local administrators quietly start arming themselves. You can almost hear it, the faint clatter of swords in the distance mixed with the flutter of silk sleeves in the capital. Somewhere between those two sounds, the samurai are being born. At first, these men aren't noble warriors with philosophies. They're problem solvers, sent to keep order in distant provinces, to guard temples, stop bandits, and make sure rice keeps moving. In other words, the early samurai were glorified security guards who never got the memo that they weren't supposed to keep the land they protected. The central court calls them bushi, military men. They call themselves saburao, those who serve, but in practice, they're already serving themselves. Land equals food, food equals soldiers, soldiers equal more land. It's a quiet, circular empire of logic that will soon devour its masters. The Heian aristocrats, meanwhile, are inventing new shades of boredom. They debate the proper colour of court robes for each season, argue about which incense best represents melancholy, and write poems comparing dewdrops to heartbreak. Meanwhile, the provinces are on fire, sometimes literally. A tax inspector might ride out to collect his due and never return. A letter arrives weeks later saying his horse came back, but not the man. The response from the capital is to compose another poem about impermanence naturally. And so, the empire survives on beauty, but loses its borders to efficiency. By the late 10th century, the balance tips. Clans like the Minamoto and the Taira rise from the provinces, gaining land and respect through service and through violence. They marry into nobility, attend court, learn poetry, and then use the court's own authority to expand their estates. Imagine a bouncer who starts managing the entire club because no one else showed up for work. In the north and west, fortified estates appear. They're practical, high walls, rice storehouses, a shrine or two, and a place to write angry letters about neighbouring landlords. These are the prototypes of the samurai castles that will later define Japan's landscape. But for now, They're just statements of self-reliance, made by men who no longer trust anyone from Kyoto. The countryside begins to hum with a new kind of order, the order of men who prefer loyalty over law and who measure respect in bushels of rice. A samurai's handshake is his word. His word is a promise. His promise is usually backed up by 10 men with bows. It's efficient if slightly unsettling. The irony, of course, is that the court still believes it's in charge. In official scrolls, the emperor's seal continues to bless the nation. But in practice, the power has already drifted outward, like ink bleeding across parchment. Beautiful at first, until you realize it's ruined the map. You can picture the scene. A Heian nobleman in pale robes, writing verses by candlelight, while far away a provincial retainer sharpens his blade by the same glow, not out of malice, but because the night is long and uncertain. Both believe they are protecting Japan, one through culture, the other through control. Neither suspects they're about to switch roles entirely. In the centuries to come, the servants will become the rulers, the poets will become patrons of soldiers, and the empire will find stability in a paradox, that sometimes the best way to govern is to outsource the chaos. For now, though, Kyoto sleeps peacefully under its paper lanterns, and the provinces whisper beneath 1,000,000 stars. The first swords gleam faintly in the moonlight, not yet legends, not yet bound by codes or honour, just tools for a job that no one else wanted. History, as always, begins quietly. When you wake the next morning in Heian, Japan, the poetry has faded a little, and the rice fields are louder. Somewhere in the mist, men who used to guard estates are now owning them. You can tell because they've stopped asking for permission and started keeping records. That's usually the sign that power has changed hands, when the swordsmen begin keeping ledgers. By the late 11th century, local clans across the provinces have turned from hired protectors into landed families. They take their names from rivers, mountains and regions, the Minamoto, the Taira, the Fujiwara. Each name sounds noble, but really it's just geography pretending to be destiny. They claim lineage from emperors or ancient heroes, but their real authority comes from the one thing that always wins in a weak empire: reliable violence. In Kyoto, this shift looks almost invisible. The court still holds banquets, still debates poetry, still appoints officials to govern provinces they will never visit. But out in the hills, a very different system is forming. Lords are chosen not by birth, but by who can actually make people obey. It's a meritocracy, but one where the exam involves arrows. The samurai class, as we now call it, becomes an inheritance. Land, duty and grudges passed down together. Loyalty takes the shape of family banners. Houses rise and fall with the ambitions of their patriarchs. You can almost hear it. The steady hammer of construction, the ring of armour, and the faint scratching of brush on paper as someone records it all, because in Japan even a rebellion must be well documented. The court's messengers arrive occasionally to remind everyone who's supposed to be in charge. They're received with polite bows, warm tea, and then ignored completely. In theory, they represent the emperor. In practice, they represent nothing except how far Kyoto is. By the 12th century, two great families, the Minamoto and the Taira, have grown powerful enough to treat loyalty as a negotiable commodity. Both have served the court, both have fought for it, both now see it as furniture. The Taira dominate politics in Kyoto, marrying into the imperial family and bathing in red-lacquered luxury. The Minamoto rule from the countryside, grumbling about taxes and honour in equal measure. They are the country cousins of power, slightly rough, quietly patient, and very well armed. For a while, the arrangement holds. The Taira keep the capital elegant, the Minamoto keep the borders intact. But power, like rice, has a tendency to spoil if left unattended. A minor succession dispute, the kind of thing usually solved with polite letters, spirals into the Genpei War of the 1180s. You can think of it as Japan's first full-scale family argument, conducted with bows instead of words. It lasts 5 years and ends with the sea, swallowing the Taira clan at Dan no Ura, their banners sinking into salt water, along with an entire chapter of aristocratic history. According to the tale of the Heike, the last Taira child emperor, barely a toddler, was carried into the waves by his grandmother to escape capture. The scene became the nation's favourite lullaby of loss. It's beautiful, tragic, and, as usual, a little impractical. Out of this devastation rises Minamoto no Yoritomo, a man more interested in administration than poetry. From his base in Kamakura, far from Kyoto's distractions, he builds a new kind of government, a military headquarters that handles justice, taxation, and local control, while the emperor remains in the capital to perform ceremonies and look divine. Japan for the first time learns to multitask. This dual system, the bakufu, means tent government, a poetic phrase that simply means power now travels well. Under it, the emperor prays, the shogun collects taxes, and both pretend the other is essential. The samurai, meanwhile, get what they've always wanted, official permission to do what they were already doing. Yoritomo appoints local stewards called Jito and constables called Shugo to manage lands, punish criminals, and send rice to Kamakura. In theory, these men serve the court through the shogun. In practice, they serve the land through themselves. Still, for a while, it works. The roads are patrolled, the estates are stable, and the samurai are paid, in rice of course, because nothing says economic stability like perishable food. Villages rebuild, temples are protected, merchants reappear in the market squares. From chaos comes order, and from order comes meetings. The Kamakura government becomes famous for its paperwork, a thing that sounds boring until you realise it replaced centuries of guesswork. Every lawsuit, land dispute, or inheritance issue gets logged, sealed, and sent to Kamakura for judgment. It's the birth of the first samurai bureaucracy, men in armour arguing over punctuation. When people talk about Japan's discipline, this is where it begins, with the idea that even violence should be properly filed. There's an odd beauty in it, the sound of ink against parchment, a soldier bending over his desk by lamplight, his armour hanging quietly in the corner like an old promise. He might dream of battle, but his real victories happen in margins and seals, in the slow conquest of chaos by routine. Back in Kyoto, the emperor's role becomes ceremonial. He reigns, but he doesn't rule. The courtiers sigh, compose more poetry, and insist that everything is fine. It's not, but no one wants to wake the illusion. In a sense, everyone gets what they want. The samurai get power, the court gets stability, and the farmers get slightly less robbed. For a medieval system, that's practically utopia. Still, peace in Japan never lasts long. The samurai may be administrators now, but they remain armed administrators, which is a dangerous breed. Disputes over land multiply, and soon even the best filing system can't contain the ambition it records. Somewhere beyond the horizon, foreign sails will soon appear, and the winds that once protected Japan will turn into history's favourite legend. But for now, the swords are sheathed, the scrolls are stacked neatly in Kamakura, and Japan hums with the sound of quiet efficiency, the kind that always comes before another storm. You open your eyes again in Kamakura, in the early 13th century. The air smells of salt and ink, the two great ingredients of medieval government. Minamoto no Yoritomo, Japan's first shogun, has turned a seaside fishing town into a capital of order. His government doesn't look like power in the traditional sense. There are no palaces of gold, no endless banquets, no emperors behind veils. Instead, there are desks, rows of them, and men in armour sitting cross-legged writing in neat columns. The age of the sword has given way to the age of forms in triplicate. The Kamakura Bakufu, literally the tent government, was supposed to be temporary, but like most temporary offices, it has an impressive talent for permanence. What began as a military headquarters during the Genpei War has become a parallel state. Kyoto still holds its festivals and ceremonies, but the business of Japan now runs on rice, seals, and steady handwriting. Yoritomo isn't a poet or philosopher, he's a survivor. He knows that victory without structure is just an intermission before the next rebellion. So he appoints men called Jito, local stewards, to manage estates, collect taxes, and settle arguments. Over them he places Shugo, constables who enforce order across provinces. It's a hierarchy of loyalty, simple in theory, messy in practice. Still, it works, at least for now. Imagine the daily rhythm. A retainer bows, presents a land complaint about a boundary marker moved 6 paces to the left. The clerk writes it down, attaches a seal, and stores it in a growing mountain of scrolls. One by one, disputes are processed. It's like an early experiment in civilization by bureaucracy. The weapons may rest, but the egos are still sharpened. The genius of Yoritomo is that he doesn't destroy Kyoto's imperial court. He rebrands it. The emperor remains the sun. The shogun becomes the shadow that moves the world while pretending not to. Together they create a delicate illusion. Divine grace on paper, military reality on the ground. The people, of course, adapt. They always do. They bow to both, pay taxes to one, and pray to whichever god seems more efficient that week. There's an understated elegance to this system. Kamakura isn't grand, but it's practical. Its temples double as record houses. Its samurai live simply, spending more time reading petitions than swinging blades. A foreign observer might call them monks with swords, and in a way, that's what they are. Disciplined, quiet, slightly overworked. When Yoritomo dies in 1199, the power vacuum is filled not by another general, but by his widow, Hojo Masako. She's called the nun shogun after taking Buddhist vows, which does nothing to make her less formidable. Under her family's regency, the Hojo clan effectively takes control of the shogunate, ruling in the name of absent men. It's a subtle reminder that history's strongest walls are often built by those the chronicles forget to mention. For several decades the system holds. Samurai lords remain loyal, the provinces are calm, and rice flows steadily into Kamakura's warehouses. The government publishes legal codes, holds court hearings, and issues land grants written so beautifully that even the losers feel slightly honoured. It's medieval Japan's version of good management, strict, quiet, and mildly terrifying. But good management is expensive. Every document needs messengers, every messenger needs a horse, and every horse needs to eat. By the mid-13th century, the balance begins to strain. The bakufu relies on loyalty it cannot always afford to reward. Samurai fight for honour and stipends that arrive increasingly late. Bureaucracy, once a blessing, becomes its own battlefield. And then the horizon darkens, not metaphorically, but literally. In 1274, strange sails appear off Kyushu. The Mongols have arrived, bringing with them a kind of warfare Japan has never seen. Coordinated troops, siege weapons, and explosives that sound like thunder. The samurai charge bravely into the storm, expecting single combat, banners waving, honour gleaming. The Mongols answer with arrows and bombs, and very little interest in poetry. The invasion is repelled only when the weather intervenes. A sudden typhoon scatters the Mongol fleet. Japan names it kamikaze, the divine wind. The word will echo centuries later for reasons that no one here could imagine. For now, it's seen as proof that heaven still reads the weather reports. 7 years later, the Mongols return with an even larger fleet. Another storm destroys them. The gods apparently have a sense of dramatic timing. Victory, however, comes with a bill. The Mongols never paid ransom, and dead enemies don't owe tribute. The samurai who fought heroically return home with honour but without land. The bakufu, already stretched thin, can't pay them. Gratitude doesn't buy rice. Discontent grows quietly, like mould under lacquer. The warrior class, built on loyalty, starts to count the cost. Back in Kamakura, The clerks keep writing. The seals still stamp, the scrolls still pile up. The system survives, but it feels tired, like a tea ceremony performed by men who have forgotten why they started pouring. The Hojo regents tighten control, pass new laws, build more temples, and watch the treasury shrink. Power, they discover, is lighter than parchment, but harder to hold. Through it all, life in Japan carries on. Farmers plant, monks chant, merchants count. To an ordinary villager, the difference between emperor and shogun means little. What matters is that someone, somewhere, promises protection from bandits. And for all its flaws, the Kamakura government keeps that promise. It's not glamorous, but it's efficient, the kind of stability people rarely notice until it's gone. You can almost see the clerk again, bent over his desk as the wind rattles the shutters. He pauses to listen, not to danger, but to the ocean. Beyond that horizon, the world is moving fast. China, Korea, trade, empires rising and falling. But Japan for now holds still. In his ink-stained hands, order feels eternal. He doesn't know it yet, but the next century will prove him wrong. For every government built on loyalty, there comes a moment when the ledger outweighs the sword. Kamakura's calm will end the same way it began, quietly, efficiently, and far away from the capital that thinks it's still in charge. The documents will survive, the dynasty will not. And as the ink dries, history prepares its next appointment. It begins, as history often does, with the illusion of control. Kamakura sits by the sea, calm and bureaucratic, a city of scrolls and schedules. The Hojo regents believe they have perfected balance, an emperor for ceremony, a shogunate for power, a country quietly paying taxes in rice. Then, one morning the horizon darkens. What looks like weather turns out to be destiny, shaped from wood and foreign ambition. In the year 1274, ships appear off the coast of Kyushu, hundreds of them, painted with foreign symbols, filled with voices that do not speak Japanese. The Mongol Empire, already the largest land power on Earth, has decided that islands should be no exception. To them, Japan is simply an inconveniently moist province waiting for annexation. To the samurai of Kamakura, it is home, damp, stubborn, and entirely theirs. The Mongols bring new rules to warfare. They use drums to coordinate, explosives to frighten, and teamwork to replace the Japanese ideal of single combat. The samurai, trained to announce their names before battle, find themselves fighting people who prefer efficiency over introductions. It's a cultural mismatch. One side reciting poetry, the other using gunpowder. At Hakata Bay, the fighting is fierce. The Japanese build defensive walls along the shore, the Mongols land with thunderclaps and smoke. For the first time, samurai who once fought each other under family banners now stand side by side. They repel the invaders, but only barely. Then nature intervenes, as if irritated by all the noise. A storm sweeps in from the south, smashing ships, scattering armies, and leaving wreckage across the coast. The surviving samurai call it divine, kamikaze, the wind of the gods. The name feels right. It explains everything neatly. Heaven has preferences, and apparently it likes well-behaved islands. In reality, the storm is just weather doing its job, but humans, ever fond of a good story, turn it into theology. The Hojo regents declare the victory miraculous, temples fill with prayers of gratitude, and Japan convinces itself that geography is divine protection. It's a comforting thought, and the beginning of a dangerous habit. 7 years later, the Mongols return with an even larger fleet. They have learned from experience. This time, they come prepared. The Japanese have also been busy, building longer coastal walls, training archers, and nervously eyeing the clouds. The second invasion is vast, more than 4,000 ships by some accounts, though historians still argue the number. But even half that would have been enough to make the sky nervous. The samurai fight fiercely, rowing out at night to attack anchored ships, setting them ablaze under moonlight. It's a war of endurance, humans against nature, and both sides seem equally stubborn. Then, as if history enjoys repeating its own jokes, another typhoon arrives. For 2 days, the heavens roar, masts splinter, ships collide, and the sea fills with men who never learned to swim. The Japanese watch from the shore as the storm does what diplomacy could not. When dawn returns, the water is littered with wreckage. The Mongol threat is gone. Japan celebrates, temples ring their bells, and somewhere in Kamakura, a clerk writes Divine Wind into the official record. It sounds eternal. It also hides a problem. Miracles don't pay stipends. Thousands of samurai had fought for months, building defences, guarding coasts, feeding soldiers, and maintaining watchtowers. They return home expecting rewards. New lands, new titles, at least some rice. But the Mongols didn't conquer anything, so there's no new land to distribute. The government thanks them for their service and explains that gratitude will have to suffice. It doesn't. Discontent spreads quietly, like mist through pines. Loyalty, once priceless, now demands an invoice. The bakufu, already strained, begins to crack under its own success. The Hojo regents raise taxes, issue more decrees, and tell everyone that spiritual merit is a form of payment. It's not a popular accounting method. You can almost hear the conversations in the taverns. Men who fought under storm clouds now complaining about late stipends, comparing scars, debating whose province has the laziest tax officials. Honour, it turns out, is easier to maintain than solvency. When an empire believes itself protected by heaven, it forgets that rice still needs harvesting. In Kamakura, the mood grows brittle. Petitions pile up, disputes multiply. The government, once a symbol of order, begins to look like a tired clerk surrounded by too many ledgers. The Hojo tried to restore faith with new temples, commissioning statues of the Buddha in gold and bronze, perhaps hoping that divine aesthetics will distract from earthly deficits. But even the monks know, peace funded by miracles rarely lasts. By the early 14th century, loyalty fractures. Regional lords begin to act independently again, claiming they are still serving the shogun, but in their own creative ways. The emperor in Kyoto, tired of being ornamental, starts whispering about restoring imperial rule, and the samurai, caught between taxes and ideals, find themselves once again sharpening swords for reasons they can't explain. It's strange to think how quietly this unravelling happens. No grand rebellion yet, no fiery declarations, just the slow fatigue of a system built on rice and reverence. The same winds that once saved Japan now carry rumours of discontent. Even the sea seems restless, waves tapping against the shore like an impatient messenger. A century from now, the country will be divided again, its capital burned, its castles smoking in endless wars. But for the moment, Kamakura still stands, a city of sand, paper and memory, guarded by men who have seen the gods at work and are starting to wonder if heaven charges interest. The storm has passed, the armour is drying, and the idea of divine protection has become both comfort and curse. Japan sleeps again beneath the steady rhythm of the waves, believing it has survived forever because the alternative is too complicated to write down. You find yourself once again in Japan early in the 14th century, a land that still smells faintly of salt and ink, but now carries a sharper scent: fatigue. The bakufu in Kamakura is still standing, but its walls are starting to whisper. The miracle of the divine wind has turned into a memory, and memories, like rice left in storage too long, tend to sour quietly. The samurai who once fought under heaven's storm clouds are now restless. Their loyalty, carefully recorded on scrolls, begins to feel more like debt. They fought bravely, waited patiently, and received mostly gratitude, which, as they keep discovering, cannot be eaten. Across the land, petitions multiply like spring bamboo. Each one begins politely, as all Japanese documents do, but beneath the flowery phrases there's a simple message: pay me, or I'll stop pretending to be loyal. Kamakura responds with what governments always use when money runs out: moral lectures. The Hojo regents remind the samurai that loyalty is sacred, that heaven smiles on patience, and that rice, while useful, is temporary. It's an argument that convinces no one, especially the hungry. Still, the illusion of harmony continues a little longer, until one emperor decides he's had enough of being decorative. In Kyoto, Emperor Go-Daigo looks out from his palace veranda, sees the shogunate's banners fluttering in every province, and realizes he's effectively the spiritual mascot of someone else's government. It's a delicate job title, but not a satisfying one. He begins to dream of restoration, not just of power, but of purpose. It's a dangerous dream for an emperor in a country already run by soldiers with steady penmanship. The plan starts in whispers, alliances with discontented samurai, secret promises, and coded letters written in a style so polite you'd never guess they were about rebellion. When the news reaches Kamakura, the Hojo are unimpressed. They've dealt with emperors before. Their usual strategy involves patience and paperwork, but this time, paperwork won't do. The emperor actually leaves the capital and starts raising armies. Suddenly, the Bakufu's careful accounting meets an expense it didn't budget for: revolution. At first, Go-Daigo wins. With the help of ambitious generals, men like Ashikaga Takauji, he marches into Kyoto, restores imperial authority, and begins what history calls the Kenmu Restoration. It's a short, shining moment when it seems like Japan might go back to the old days, with emperors ruling and samurai politely following orders. Unfortunately, the emperor forgets that the samurai have changed. They no longer see themselves as servants of the throne. They see themselves as the throne's employers. Ashikaga Takauji, once Go-Daigo's ally, decides he prefers being kingmaker to being an employee. He turns his army around, declares loyalty to a different branch of the imperial family, and suddenly Japan has two emperors. One in Kyoto, one in Yoshino. Two courts, both legitimate, both collecting taxes, both insisting that the other is an imposter. It's the sort of administrative redundancy that could only happen in a country that truly loves documents. The Northern Court, supported by the Ashikaga, rules from Kyoto and calls itself the rightful line. The Southern Court, loyal to Go-Daigo, holds Yoshino among the mountains, writing elegant manifestos about divine legitimacy while slowly running out of ink. For the next 50 years, Japan lives with dual authority. Two emperors, two governments, and an entire nation learning to navigate double bureaucracy. Every law must be checked twice, every oath must specify which emperor it mentions. Some samurai solve this by swearing loyalty to both, and hoping the gods aren't too observant. The Ashikaga, practical as ever, established their own shogunate in Kyoto in 1336. It's a government born not of conquest, but of exhaustion. People are tired of ideals, they want receipts, so the new shoguns rule with a blend of force and finesse. Less divine mandate, more plausible paperwork. It's not glamorous, but it's efficient. Ashikaga Takauji repairs temples, appoints loyal governors, and builds a government that feels almost modern in its attention to detail. He even sponsors the arts, because nothing stabilizes power like well-funded painters. Meanwhile, the countryside keeps adapting. Regional warlords gain more autonomy, local markets expand. The samurai evolve from purely military men into land managers with swords, in other words, middle management with armor. Villages grow around castles, trade routes revive, and Japan begins to hum again, not with war, but with the cautious rhythm of administration. Still, beneath the order lies a quiet anxiety. The dual courts continue their ritual dance of legitimacy, sending letters, envoys, and occasionally armies. Every victory is temporary, every peace conditional. The people learn to bow in two directions just to be safe. In some provinces, peasants pay taxes twice, once to each court, which may explain why medieval Japanese coin purses were famously empty. There's irony in it all. An empire obsessed with harmony has accidentally built the most polite civil war in history. Both sides claim loyalty to the same ideal. Both sides quote the same classics. Both sides insist the other must surrender. Respectfully, of course. By the time the Southern Court finally fades into history, the nation has already grown used to decentralization. Local lords command their own armies, and the shogun's authority depends largely on how much paper he can afford to print. At the centre of it all, Kyoto remains beautiful and doomed, a city of lacquered temples, echoing gongs, and officials who file reports while the roofs burn. The people continue living, as people always do, selling rice, raising children, gossiping about which emperor is handsomer. The world outside Japan changes, trade routes widen, silver moves, empires collide. But here, everything feels quietly repetitive. The paperwork continues, and for a while, that's enough. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the scratching of brushes, the gentle cough of a clerk in a smoky room, and the distant chant of a monk reciting prayers for stability. It sounds peaceful, but peace has a half-life. The illusion will hold for another century before collapsing completely into fire. For now, though, Japan rests in its favourite position, between reform and ruin, carefully writing down both possibilities, just in case. Kyoto has always loved beauty, and beauty unfortunately has expensive taste. By the middle of the 15th century, the city glows like a dream and trembles like a candle. The Ashikaga shoguns have ruled for 100 years, long enough to believe that paper can hold back history. It cannot. The treasury is thin, the provinces are restless, and the noble families have learned that loyalty is best expressed with armies. The shogun at the time, Ashikaga Yoshimasa, prefers art to administration. He builds gardens so perfect they make poets cry, and hosts tea ceremonies that require months of preparation and several lifetimes of patience. The city is refined, radiant, and broke. In this delicate silence, a quarrel over succession begins. It's not even a large argument at first, just a question of who will be the next shogun. But in Kyoto, small disputes have a terrible habit of catching fire. Two powerful families, the Hosokawa and the Yamana, take opposite sides. Both claim honour, both claim necessity, and both immediately begin fortifying their mansions. The year is 1467. No one knows it yet, but Japan is about to enter a century of chaos. The Onin War begins as an argument and ends as an accident that refuses to stop. Armies march into Kyoto not as invaders, but as residents who have misplaced their manners. Every alley becomes a battleground. Every temple becomes a fortress. The city's beauty turns against itself. Pagodas become watchtowers, and gardens become graveyards. For 10 years, Kyoto eats itself from within. The chronicles say that fires burned for months, that smoke choked the sun, and that the Kamo River ran dark with ash. Entire districts vanished, merchants fled, nobles hid, monks prayed, and samurai drew their swords in rooms decorated with priceless screens. Even poetry grew quiet. It's hard to write about cherry blossoms when your neighbour's house is on fire. What makes the Onin War remarkable is how little anyone wins. The Hosokawa survive but lose half their wealth. The Yamana survive but lose their minds. The shogun, Yoshimasa, simply leaves his palace and starts a new one in the hills, where he can design architecture without interruptions from burning buildings. His retirement home, in Kakuji, the Silver Pavilion, becomes one of Japan's most serene monuments, built by a man who couldn't govern anything except sand and silence. When the war finally burns itself out, Kyoto is a ruin. The imperial court still exists, but its influence is as thin as the paper of its scrolls. The shogunate still issues orders, but the provinces no longer listen. The system of central authority collapses like a stage set after the play. What remains is a vast fragmented landscape of regional lords, daimyo, each with their own armies, castles and ambitions. The Sengoku period, The age of the warring states begins not with a declaration but with exhaustion. The word Sengoku means the country at war, but the wars are not for glory or ideology. They're about rice fields, trade routes, and family pride, the ordinary materials of extraordinary violence. A lord controls a few provinces, his vassals control a few towns, and everyone else controls their nerves. For the common people, life becomes strangely local. They trade, farm, and survive under whichever banner currently flutters over their village. One season it's the red crest of the Takeda, another it's the blue fan of the Mori. Taxes change, names change, rules change, but the rhythm of work continues. Even chaos must eat. The samurai, once servants of the state, now serve whoever can afford them. Loyalty becomes practical again, direct, personal, negotiable. The grand ideals of the past are replaced by simpler equations. Protection in exchange for obedience, food in exchange for peace. Some call it corruption, others call it clarity. In the midst of this disarray, new things bloom. Ironically, peace had been too polite to innovate, but war is inventive. Castle architecture evolves from defensive huts into stone fortresses with tall keeps and moats. Trade revives as each daimyo seeks wealth to fund soldiers. Merchants begin to matter. Coin begins to compete with rice. The sword still rules, but it starts to share power with arithmetic. You can picture it. A once aristocratic samurai now standing beside an accountant, discussing how many sacks of rice it takes to feed 100 men for 10 days. Strategy becomes logistics, and glory becomes budgeting. If there's a symbol of Japan's transformation, it's the abacus, a quiet, clicking sound replacing the clash of steel. Back in Kyoto, the ruins remain. Wild grass covers what used to be noble estates. The palaces echo with the songs of birds that no longer care about titles. The temples continue their rituals, partly for the gods, partly for habit. When travellers pass through, they describe a city both haunted and humble, a place where beauty survived the fire, just slightly singed. There's a strange peace in the aftermath. Without central control, Japan becomes paradoxically stable in its instability. Everyone knows their own warlord, and no one pretends to know who governs the nation. Authority becomes a local phenomenon, like weather. In one valley, sunshine and order. In the next, thunder and rebellion. For the people of Kyoto, life goes on. Markets reopen among ruins, and artisans carve new sculptures from burnt wood. The tea ceremony, perfected by survivors of chaos, becomes a ritual of control. Hot water, measured gestures, serenity in a world that refuses to be calm. It's no coincidence that Japan's quietest art is born from its loudest century. From the ashes of the Onin War, the idea of Japan changes. Power is no longer something inherited from the heavens. It's something negotiated, built, and sometimes stolen. The emperor becomes myth, the shogun becomes memory, and the samurai become entrepreneurs of survival. Is messy, pragmatic, and strangely alive. If you stand among Kyoto's ruins long enough, you can almost hear it. The whisper of ashes shifting in the wind, the steady rebuilding that follows every disaster. The city that ate itself hasn't vanished. It's just learning new table manners. In the distance, a new kind of leader is rising, a man who will look at the chaos and see opportunity. But for now, the city sleeps under its own smoke, dreaming of order it can no longer imagine. The smoke from Kyoto's fires drifts outward, and by the time it fades, Japan is no longer one country. It's a patchwork of ambitions stitched together with swords. The Sengoku period is now in full motion, a century of lords trying to make their maps slightly larger before breakfast. Each domain has its own walls, banners, taxes, and weather. Power is local, loyalty conditional, and diplomacy mostly involves bowing before someone you plan to betray later. If you could hover above the islands, you'd see hundreds of castles glittering in the mist, each surrounded by small towns. These castle towns are the nervous system of a new Japan, half fortress, half economy. The daimyo, the great lords, rule their lands like independent kingdoms, minting coins, training armies, and hiring craftsmen who know how to build moats that politely discourage visitors. The samurai, once an elite attached to a single shogun, have become freelancers. Some serve faithfully for generations, others switch sides as easily as one changes sandals. War has become a profession, but so has administration. Every successful warlord needs scribes, accountants, and rice measurers, men who can count as well as they can kill. And amid all this armoured efficiency, something unexpected happens. Trade. Merchants previously looked down upon as necessary nuisances find themselves courted by generals. A warlord without coin cannot keep his army fed, and an army without rice tends to defect. The wealthy merchant houses of Sakai and Osaka rise quietly, funding wars while pretending to hate profit. Money, it turns out, is faster than loyalty. Then, in 1543, a small ship drifts onto the southern island of Tanegashima. Aboard are Portuguese traders, wearing clothes that confuse everyone and carrying something even stranger: firearms. Japan meets gunpowder not for the first time, but for the first time in bulk and with user manuals. The Tanegashima matchlock quickly spreads across the islands because nothing inspires adoption like envy. Within a decade, local gunsmiths are producing thousands of them, sometimes more efficiently than the Europeans who introduced them. For the samurai, it's an identity crisis in slow motion. The sword, once the soul of the warrior, is now competing with a device that turns courage into a question of reload speed. At first, the elite dismiss it as dishonourable, but then someone gets shot and opinions evolve rapidly. By the 1570s, the crack of gunfire has joined the soundscape of Japan. Battlefields once full of dueling champions now echo with coordinated volleys and shouted orders. The change is not only technological but psychological. Firearms require discipline, timing and trust, virtues that bureaucrats already understood. The future of war belongs to those who can turn chaos into rhythm. And so, the new samurai is part soldier, part statistician, and part accountant. Out of this world of calculations rises one man whose ambition seems larger than geography: Oda Nobunaga. He begins with a small domain near Nagoya, and an even smaller amount of patience for inefficiency. Nobunaga is a man who finds beauty in control. He reorganizes his armies, standardizes weapons, and introduces the revolutionary idea that loyalty should be rewarded in cash instead of vague gratitude. Under his leadership, Japan's fragmented lords begin to tremble. Nobunaga's army, equipped with hundreds of matchlocks, proves that planning beats tradition. At the Battle of Nagashino in 1575, he arranges his troops behind wooden barricades and orders volley fire in rotations. The charging cavalry of the Takeda clan meets the rhythmic certainty of gunpowder and mathematics. It is less a battle than a demonstration, an equation solved in smoke and noise. From this moment, Japan's future is written not in swords, but in logistics. Nobunaga builds roads for supply, granaries for taxes, and towns for trade. The economy hums, peasants plant more rice, merchants open more shops, and even bandits start keeping schedules. A strange kind of order begins to emerge inside the chaos, but order has a habit of making people nervous. Nobunaga's style of leadership, brilliant, ruthless, and allergic to flattery, creates as many enemies as victories. In 1582, he dies dramatically, trapped in a temple by one of his own generals. His body is never found, and his legend never leaves. In the wake of his death, another figure steps forward: Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a man born with no title, no land, and an extraordinary sense of timing. He rises from peasantry to power through sheer intelligence, charm, and an uncanny ability to guess what people want before they say it. Hideyoshi inherits Nobunaga's dream of unification, but adds a new element: diplomacy disguised as kindness. He finishes what Nobunaga began, One by one, the regional lords bend the knee, or find themselves gently persuaded by armies. Hideyoshi's Japan becomes the most centralized it has been in centuries, yet beneath the unity lies exhaustion. Decades of war have left the population weary and the land fragile. He knows peace must come, but he also knows that peace must be enforced. So he does something radical. He takes away everyone's swords. In 1588, he orders the sword hunt, collecting weapons from farmers and commoners under the pretext of melting them into a giant statue of the Buddha. It's a brilliant gesture. Religion as recycling. The swords are gone, the people are disarmed, and Japan exhales for the first time in 100 years. Hideyoshi's next idea is less practical. He decides Japan should invade Korea and possibly China. It is, by any standard, ambitious. The campaigns begin in 1592, costly, brutal, and ultimately fruitless. The armies return home with fewer soldiers and more stories than victories. The dream of expansion dissolves in the mud of distant battlefields. Yet even this failure has a strange afterglow. The Korean campaigns introduce new maps, new crafts, and new ideas. Among the wreckage, a generation of Japanese leaders learn something invaluable, that the world beyond the islands is larger than their feuds, and that unification at home matters more than adventure abroad. By the time Hideyoshi dies in 1598, Japan stands at a crossroads. The wars are nearly over, the lords are subdued, and the samurai find themselves once again with no one left to fight. In the calm that follows, a new kind of problem appears: how to manage peace without falling asleep at the desk. The next leader, Tokugawa Ieyasu, waits patiently in the wings. He has watched chaos long enough to know that lasting order must be slow, deliberate, and slightly boring. But before he builds his peace, he will finish one last war. For now, the sound of muskets fades into the distance, and the people of Japan, for the first time in generations, listen to silence and wonder what comes after ambition. The year is 1585 and Japan is finally tired enough to try peace. After a century of smoke, sieges, and very motivated accountants, the islands fall quiet. The unifier Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who began his career carrying sandals for a warlord, now carries the entire country. His methods are not gentle, but they are thorough, the kind of efficiency that can only be achieved by someone who never plans to rest again. Hideyoshi knows the smell of chaos. He has spent half his life marching through it. He has watched lords rise and fall faster than the ink on their treaties could dry. He understands that victory is useless without order, and that order must be built brick by brick like a castle wall. And so, he begins his grand project, turning a land of warriors into a nation that can finally exhale. His tools are not just soldiers, but surveyors. Across Japan, men with measuring ropes and bamboo rods move through fields, counting everything that can be counted. Every rice paddy, every stream, every tiny plot of land is recorded in detailed registers. It is called the Taiko Land Survey, a national audit disguised as administration. Peasants discover that their farms now have official sizes, official values, and official taxes. It's astonishing what people will tolerate when it's written neatly on paper. Next comes the sword hunt. Hideyoshi decrees that all weapons owned by farmers, merchants, and monks must be surrendered. The stated reason is poetic. He plans to melt them down to make a giant Buddha statue. The real reason is simple: disarm everyone except the army. When the swords pile up, the sight is extraordinary. Blades that once gleamed in war now stacked like discarded promises. In temples across the country, bells ring, not for victory, but for inventory. For the samurai, this is a strange moment. Their profession is suddenly redundant. Without wars to fight, they must learn to serve through administration and etiquette. Hideyoshi divides society into clean categories. Samurai at the top, farmers below, artisans next, and merchants at the bottom. Everyone gets a title, whether they like it or not. Social mobility, once a matter of courage, becomes a matter of paperwork. The system works in its way. Farmers plant and pay, artisans craft, merchants trade, and samurai oversee. The classes are like layers of lacquer, rigid, polished, and designed to last. Hideyoshi's vision of Japan is one in which everyone stays where they are supposed to, doing what they are supposed to so that peace can finally become a habit. Meanwhile, his castles rise from the plains, vast, glittering monuments of stone and gold leaf. The rhythmic tapping of chisels echoes through the valleys as builders carve a new skyline of stability. Osaka Castle becomes his masterpiece. Enormous, symmetrical, both fortress and theatre. From its high towers, Hideyoshi can see everything he has organised. Rice fields, rivers, villages, and the thin line between security and boredom. He builds not just structures, but rituals, tea ceremonies, sumptuary laws, and protocols for bowing. These are his new weapons. He hosts gatherings where warriors sit cross-legged, sipping bitter tea in silence, while thinking about the last man who talked too loudly. This is discipline by design, peace dressed as culture. Hideyoshi's dream is to make Japan so orderly that even ambition runs on schedule. He controls trade, regulates ports, and limits foreign contact to a few approved locations. The chaos of the past century is transformed into something more predictable, a national routine. For the first time in generations, farmers can harvest without fear of soldiers trampling their fields. Children grow up without hearing the word rebellion. The air smells of cedar, not smoke. And yet, beneath this perfection, the old hunger still stirs. Samurai whisper about lost glory. Merchants wonder why they rank so low when everyone borrows their money. Peasants dream of mobility that no longer exists. Peace is wonderful, but it has side effects. Mainly, reflection. People begin to remember that stability can feel suspiciously like captivity. Hideyoshi himself cannot rest. Even as he constructs castles, he begins planning invasions. Korea, he decides, would make an excellent addition to the neighbourhood. In 1592, his armies crossed the sea. They fight bravely, occupy cities, and discover that logistics across water are far less poetic than battles on land. The war drags on, supplies dwindle. Soldiers write home about strange food and endless mud. It is not the glorious expansion he imagined. Back in Japan, the bureaucrats keep working. They maintain ledgers, collect taxes, and continue the illusion that everything is under control. When the Korean campaign collapses, it is managed like an accounting error, quietly and without admitting fault. By the time Hideyoshi dies in 1598, Japan is unified but uneasy, like a field of grass pressed flat by the wind, waiting to see if it will stand up again. Still, his legacy is monumental. The land survey, the class divisions, the castle towns, all of it will survive long. After him, he has given Japan the blueprint for peace, even if that peace still smells faintly of ambition. His policies will become the foundation for the Tokugawa shogunate, which will soon perfect the art of ruling through routine. You can almost hear the sound of chisels fading, replaced by the softer rhythm of brushes and ink. The great unifier's voice grows distant, but his system remains. In the silence that follows, Japan takes its first deep breath in 100 years, and somewhere in the future a clever family is already watching, preparing to turn this exhausted peace into a permanent profession. It begins, as great things often do, with exhaustion. When Toyotomi Hideyoshi dies in 1598, Japan is unified but uncertain, like a freshly built castle whose walls haven't yet settled. His generals bow politely at his funeral, then immediately start calculating who among them will inherit the future. The man who moves slowest wins. Tokugawa Ieyasu has made a career of waiting. He has survived 4 masters, 6 wars, and an age of spectacular impatience. He knows that victory belongs not to the loudest sword, but to the quietest ledger. When the armies finally meet at Sekigahara in 1600, he wins not through heroics, but through timing. His forces hold, his allies defect at the right moment, and his enemies do what ambitious men often do: overcomplicate things. The battle ends in a single morning, the mist rising over a field of flags. It's not just a military victory, it's an organisational triumph. Ieyasu looks across the muddy plain and sees something no one else does: the possibility of peace that could last longer than anyone alive. He becomes shogun in 1603, not as a conqueror, but as an engineer of order. Where Hideyoshi ruled through energy, Ieyasu rules through gravity. He doesn't rebuild Japan, he settles it. The new capital rises in Edo, a fishing village transformed into the brain of an empire. It smells of sawdust, sea salt, and ambition. The city grows quickly. Streets laid out in grids, canals cutting through rice fields. Samurai move in, merchants follow, and before long, Edo becomes the hum of predictable power. The kind of place where even rebellion must fill out a form. The Tokugawa government is built on one quiet principle: control the lords by controlling their schedules. The daimyo are powerful, but they are not trusted. Ieyasu's descendants design a system that is both elegant and cruel. Every domain must send its lord to live in Edo every other year, leaving his family behind as collateral when he returns home. It's called Sankin Kotai, alternate attendance. The logic is simple. Constant travel keeps everyone too busy to plot. The roads fill with endless processions of samurai, servants, horses, and palanquins, marching to the rhythm of obligation. Travellers watch them pass, dazzled by banners and armour that shine like moving festivals. The people call it the Parade of Peace, but it's really the most expensive commute in history. In Edo, the lords maintain mansions they rarely use, staffed by servants they rarely see. Their wealth drains into ceremonies, gifts, and appearances. Over time, they grow polite, impoverished, and too well-mannered to rebel. The shogunate has turned feudalism into a loyalty program: points awarded for attendance, penalties for initiative. The system's genius lies in its boredom. For 250 years, nothing dramatic happens, which in historical terms is astonishing. The Buka Shohato, a set of laws issued in 1615, regulates everything from castle repairs to marriages. It reads like the world's first corporate handbook for samurai. Don't form alliances without permission. Don't build walls taller than necessary. Don't marry without approval. It's bureaucracy disguised as philosophy. The samurai obey, partly out of discipline and partly because no one can afford the paperwork required to disobey. They trade battlefields for offices, armour for ink, and oaths for stipends measured in rice. Each domain is an echo of Edo, a miniature bureaucracy humming with duty and debt. Meanwhile, Edo itself becomes a marvel. Wooden bridges arch over canals, tea houses bloom along narrow lanes, and street vendors sell grilled fish to bureaucrats who have forgotten what war smells like. By day, the city hums with commerce. By night, it glows with lanterns and gossip. The peace is not just political, it's sensory. The sound of clogs on wooden planks replaces the clash of steel. Of course, peace has its price. The samurai class, forbidden from farming or trading, depends entirely on stipends that don't keep up with inflation. Many sell their heirlooms quietly, others take side jobs as teachers or poets. Some wander as ronin, masterless warriors adrift in a world that no longer needs them. The ideal of Bushidō begins to change. It stops being about fighting and starts being about behaviour. The sword becomes less a weapon than a symbol, an accessory worn with dignity and mild nostalgia. Under the Tokugawa, Japan's isolation becomes policy. Foreign ships are restricted to a few ports. Christianity is banned. Trade with Europe filters through the Dutch and the Chinese at Nagasaki. The shogunate calls it Sakoku, the closed country. In practice, it's less isolation and more curation. the world's first attempt at quality control on globalization. And yet, within this carefully sealed world, culture flourishes. Ukiyo-e prints capture the floating world of actors, courtesans, and city life. Haiku poets write about frogs and moonlight. Philosophers debate Confucian virtue over tea. The people live as if history has been put on pause, and for the first time they can afford to. Still, every pause is temporary. The shoguns grow older, the laws multiply, and the system begins to creak under its own perfection. When a government's greatest strength is routine, its greatest threat is change. Somewhere beyond the sea, steam engines are hissing, factories are rumbling, and the rest of the world is quietly speeding up. But for now, Japan moves at the pace of rice seasons and paperwork. Ieyasu's descendants maintain the illusion of eternity, and the samurai learn to live in slow motion, half legend, half accountant. In the long evenings, when the streets are lit by paper lanterns and the sound of shamisen drifts through open shutters, it feels like this peace might last forever. Of course, it won't. No peace ever does. But for now, Edo hums gently, and history seems content to take a nap. You wake up in Edo, somewhere in the middle of the 18th century, and everything is beautifully ordinary. The streets are swept, the rivers run clear, and the only noise comes from wooden clogs tapping against bridge planks. The war drums have long gone silent. The smell of the city is a mixture of grilled fish, damp tatami, and ink. Peace has lasted so long that it has started to feel hereditary. For the samurai, this is both a triumph and a problem. Their ancestors conquered the country. Their descendants balance budgets. They still wear two swords, but now the blades are ceremonial, symbols of an authority that no longer requires violence. Each month they receive stipends in rice, measured not in sacks but in an abstract unit called koku, roughly the amount needed to feed one person for a year. The figure looks impressive on paper. On the table, it's just enough to buy debt. The samurai class, once built on conquest, now lives on arithmetic. They keep ledgers, issue receipts, and compose poetry about both. A man's honour is measured not by his victories, but by how accurately he submits his expense reports. Their homes are modest, their incomes fixed, their pride constant. In quiet offices across Edo, rows of armoured accountants bow over their scrolls. Their swords lie neatly beside the inkstones, unused but never unwatched. A visitor might think these men are scholars, and in a way they are. Scholars of stability. For them, the greatest battle is against boredom. A few still dream of action. They practice sword drills at dawn, slicing through air thick with nostalgia. They attend poetry gatherings at dusk, writing verses about plum blossoms and lost eras. They are the custodians of memory in a city that prefers schedules. Some open fencing schools, teaching forms older than the peace they now live in. Others, less patient, wander the country as ronin, masterless warriors whose loyalty has expired. They drift from town to town, part legend, part inconvenience. Now and then, one of them stirs history. The tale of the 47 ronin becomes the great bedtime story of the age. Men who avenge their master's death, and then calmly surrendered to execution, proving that loyalty can still be terminal. People love the story because it's tragic and organised, the two qualities Japan admires most. The shogunate frowns but allows it. A moral example disguised as entertainment never hurts. Outside the samurai quarters, Edo pulses with life. Merchants, officially the lowest class, are quietly in charge. Their wealth fills the streets with colour, silk shops, bookstalls, theatres and tea houses. Money flows like a secret current beneath the still surface of order. The samurai may hold the titles, but the merchants hold the wallets. It's an unspoken arrangement. The proud borrow from the practical, and everyone pretends not to notice. Art thrives in this contradiction. Ukiyo-e woodblock prints capture the floating world. Actors in lavish costumes, courtesans beneath parasols, landscapes so calm they feel like sighs. The samurai buy these prints on credit, hanging reminders of pleasure in houses dedicated to restraint. It's the perfect compromise. Discipline on the outside, longing framed neatly on the wall. In evenings the city glows with lanterns. Poets sit in sack shops, writing haiku about frogs, snow, or the quiet despair of being punctual. Samurai officials join them after work, removing their swords before sitting down, as if putting their status on the shelf for a while. Conversation drifts between philosophy and gossip. Someone mentions Confucian virtue, someone else quotes a Zen monk, someone refills the cups. It is peace sustained one sip at a time. But peace has a weight. The same order that protects the city also confines it. Every role is assigned: samurai to serve, farmers to plant, artisans to craft, merchants to earn, and everyone else to stay politely in their lane. For a society that reveres harmony, it's almost perfect. But harmony, left unchecked, becomes stillness. In the small hours when the streets are empty and the lamps burn low, you can sense it, a faint melancholy, like dust on polished wood. A samurai clerk awake at his desk looks at his reflection in the inkstone and wonders what his ancestors would think. They fought for glory, he fights for balance. They died young, he will retire early. The sword beside him gleams faintly, less as a weapon and more as a memory. The word Bushidō, the way of the warrior, still echoes through the corridors of power, but it now means dignity rather than danger. It tells samurai how to behave, how to bow, how to accept poverty without complaint. It's a moral compass in a world with no battles left to navigate. Even the ronin have changed. Many find work as bodyguards, teachers, or detectives. Others join theatre troupes, playing exaggerated versions of themselves, heroes from a past no one really wants to return to. The audience claps politely, relieved that their own lives involve less blood and more bookkeeping. By the late 18th century, Edo is the largest city in the world. Over 1 million people living under roofs of wood and dreams of permanence. Fires sometimes sweep through its neighbourhoods, but the people rebuild again and again, as if repetition itself were a virtue. The rhythm of life is as predictable as the seasons: rice planting, tax collection, poetry, fireworks, typhoons, and tea. The samurai remain at the centre of it all, quiet and slightly out of place, like statues in a busy garden. They've become the guardians of an idea that discipline itself is a form of courage. When the merchants boast too loudly, or the actors laugh too freely, it's the samurai's silence that restores the balance. Their stillness has become the country's pulse. Some nights, in the outer districts, a group of ronin might gather by the river, passing a sack bottle and remembering the wars they never fought. Their laughter carries softly over the water, blending with the sound of frogs and distant bells. It's not glory, but it's peace. And that's a kind of victory too. In the morning, Edo will wake again to the clink of abacus beads, the shuffle of sandals, the sound of brushes against paper. The empire of order continues, slow and steady, built on routine, pride, and the quiet endurance of men who once lived by the sword and now live by the schedule. History for the moment seems perfectly balanced, a delicate equation with no unknowns. But equations, as every clerk knows, don't stay balanced forever. Somewhere beyond the horizon, ships of iron and smoke are waiting to rewrite the rules. For now, though, Edo sleeps soundly, lulled by the hum of ledgers and the rustle of silk. By the time the 18th century tilts quietly into the 19th, Japan has mastered the art of appearing unchangeable. From a distance it looks eternal, the same tea houses, the same temples, the same paper lanterns flickering against the same wooden eaves. But up close, you can feel the tension, the effort it takes to remain so calm for so long. Edo society is a vast stage play, and everyone knows their role. The samurai bow, the merchants count, the artisans craft, and the farmers, as always, provide the rice that keeps the play funded. It's an empire built not on conquest or faith, but on choreography. Everything that matters happens through gestures. How low you bow, how long you pause, how many syllables you use to apologize. Confucianism provides the script. Every action has its proper place, every relationship its correct direction. Fathers guide sons, lords guide retainers, husbands guide wives, and heaven mercifully guides everyone else. It sounds simple, but maintaining moral geometry takes work. People study it the way others study astronomy. Precise, reverent, slightly exhausting. Zen Buddhism softens the edges. It teaches stillness, simplicity, and the art of finding meaning in the uneventful. Together, Confucian duty and Zen calm become the twin pillars of Edo culture. Strict ethics wrapped in serenity. The result is a civilization that prizes control as beauty. Within this discipline, art blooms. Poets write verses so short they could almost fit inside a sigh. Painters capture landscapes where nothing happens and yet everything exists. Actors on the kabuki stage play out dramas of love and revenge with movements refined to the precision of breathing. Even pleasure has rules. The tea ceremony, that elegant ritual of water, silence, and self-restraint, becomes a moral compass disguised as an afternoon. For the samurai, this aesthetic of control replaces the old rush of battle. Meditation takes the place of sword practice. Calligraphy becomes a kind of internal fencing. A perfect brushstroke is as honourable as a perfect duel and considerably safer. A young warrior might spend hours tracing a single character, steadying his breath until ink and intention match. In this world, self-control is the only enemy worth fighting. Bushidō, the way of the warrior, slowly transforms from behaviour to belief. It's no longer just a code for soldiers, it becomes a philosophy for everyone. Samurai texts from this era read like moral manuals: loyalty to lord and family, frugality, sincerity, patience. The sword remains, but mostly as decoration, a polite reminder of values rather than violence. People quote the Hagakure, a collection of samurai reflections, the way others quote poetry. It speaks of death, duty, and how to fold one's emotions neatly before use. Outside the castles, commoners develop their own parallel world, the ukiyo, or floating world, where actors, courtesans, and writers create a culture of pleasure that balances all that discipline. It's a quiet rebellion conducted through theatre tickets and love letters. Within the boundaries of a single night in the pleasure district, class barriers dissolve. A merchant can flirt with a noble, a samurai can forget to frown. The next morning, everyone returns to their place as if the dream never happened. Merchants, officially at the bottom of the social hierarchy, become the patrons of this new culture. They fund kabuki theatres, commission prints, and subtly rewrite the economy of joy. The government pretends to disapprove, but quietly taxes everything. The floating world keeps the rigid one afloat. Meanwhile, Edo's streets hum with a kind of serene repetition. Servants sweep courtyards before dawn, monks chant in low tones that blend with the sound of distant bells. Children recite moral lessons from primers approved by the shogunate. Obey, endure, be humble. To live in such a world is to become fluent in understatement. The highest compliment you can pay someone is that they are ordinary in an exemplary way. There's humour here too, though very quietly. People joke that the only thing that moves faster than gossip in Edo is the bureaucracy. A samurai official might spend 3 months investigating who misplaced a teacup and then issue a 47-page apology for the inconvenience. Artisans compete not in invention but in perfection. Who can make a cup more symmetrical, a garden more effortless. Progress in Edo is measured by how beautifully you can stay the same. Yet even perfection has cracks. Beneath the surface calm, the economy trembles. Famine visits in bad years, merchants outgrow their station, peasants grow tired of taxes disguised as tradition. The samurai, bound by pride and shrinking stipends, slip deeper into debt. They sell family heirlooms discreetly, explaining that true honour is invisible. The moral order creaks, but because everyone moves slowly, it doesn't collapse. It just sighs. As the decades drift by, curiosity begins to leak through the cracks. Dutch traders at Nagasaki bring in books about anatomy, astronomy, and machines powered by something called steam. Scholars translate them under the cautious name Rangaku, meaning Dutch learning. The authorities tolerate it because science at least doesn't seem rebellious. But these foreign ideas sit quietly in the corners of Japanese minds, waiting for an era less polite. In the meantime, life goes on in rhythm. A samurai clerk writes a haiku about frost on the temple roof. A courtesan ties her kimono with a bow so perfectly it could be mistaken for mathematics. A monk pours tea, the steam curling upward like thought made visible. Everything is precise. Everything is calm. The entire nation seems to breathe in unison. And then, far beyond the horizon, the sound of a new world begins to murmur. A hiss of engines, the hum of coal, the whistle of something mechanical and impatient. The islands do not hear it yet, but the air is already changing. The world that has spent centuries mastering stillness is about to meet motion. For now, though, the polite empire remains intact. The gardens are swept, the robes perfectly folded, the calligraphy precise. If perfection could last forever, this would be the moment to stop time. But history never respects perfect timing. Somewhere beyond the calm, a ship's steam is rising, and Japan is about to blink. The year is 1853, and Japan is still pretending the world doesn't exist. The tea is still hot, the garden still raked, and the bureaucracy still confident that if it ignores foreign affairs long enough, they will politely go away. Then, one summer morning in Edo Bay, the horizon darkens. It is not a storm this time, but something far stranger. 4 enormous black ships puffing smoke like irritated dragons. The townspeople rush to the shore, staring at the impossible sight. The ships are taller than castles, made of metal, and moving without wind. The water trembles beneath them. They carry cannons so large they look like ideas rather than weapons. These are the vessels of Commodore Matthew Perry, arriving from the United States with a letter from his president and the confidence of someone who knows the size of his guns. To the people of Edo, it feels as though the future has arrived uninvited and forgotten to take off its shoes. The shogunate's officials, used to centuries of predictable protocol, struggle to categorize the event. The visitors are not merchants, not monks, not invaders, at least not yet. They are diplomats with gunboats, a combination that does not appear in any manual. The shogun's government reacts with its traditional weapon, a meeting. Courtiers and ministers gather, composing memoranda that are beautifully written and almost completely useless. The question of how to respond to the Americans fills scroll after scroll of exquisite calligraphy. No one knows whether to fight, negotiate, or faint politely. The consensus is to stall, a strategy Japan has always excelled at. Perry, however, is immune to subtlety. He delivers his message: open the country to trade, or the cannons will do it for you. Then he sails away, promising to return for an answer in exactly 1 year. Punctuality, it turns out, can be terrifying. The officials of Edo spend the next 12 months in a state of elegant panic. When Perry returns in 1854, the Tokugawa shogunate signs the Treaty of Kanagawa. It is the first time in 2 centuries that Japan has opened its doors, and it does so reluctantly, like a host forced to greet a guest who has brought his own furniture. The treaty allows American ships to dock for supplies and ensures fair treatment for shipwrecked sailors. Small steps, but the wall is cracked. The news spreads quickly. Within a few years, other Western nations arrive, each with their own treaties and their own cannons. Britain, France, Russia, and the Netherlands all take turns negotiating friendship, a word that in diplomacy often means leverage. The shogunate, once the master of the order, finds itself juggling demands written in languages it barely understands. Across the country, samurai begin to argue about what it all means. Some believe Japan must adapt, learn Western science, build modern ships, survive by imitation. Others insist the foreign barbarians must be expelled immediately, preferably with the same enthusiasm used for past rebellions. The slogan of the moment becomes Sono Joy. Revere the emperor, expel the barbarians. It's an ambitious policy, as most good slogans are. Domains divide into reformists and loyalists. Scholars debate Western anatomy by candlelight, while swordsmiths sharpen blades for civil war. The air is thick with contradiction, curiosity mixed with outrage, fear mixed with fascination. Newspapers begin to appear, printing rumours faster than the government can suppress them. It's the dawn of public opinion, which, like steam power, cannot be easily put back in the box once released. In Edo, the shogun himself begins to fade into irrelevance. Tokugawa Yasada, who happens to be in charge when the Americans arrive, is more scholar than soldier. Courtiers whisper that he faints easily, which, given the circumstances, is entirely reasonable. The Bakufu, once invincible, now looks like an elderly man blinking into the sunlight after a long nap. Meanwhile, in distant domains, ambitious leaders begin to move. The Satsuma and Choshu clans in the south start collecting modern weapons and hiring foreign engineers. Samurai who once polished swords now study English verbs. Others, still loyal to old ideals, see this as betrayal. Duels and assassinations return to the streets, proof that nothing wakes up history like paperwork written in two languages. The contradictions multiply. Japan bans Christianity while importing Western canons. It teaches Confucian humility while learning to manufacture rifles. It maintains isolation while reading translated physics. The country becomes a paradox in motion, polite on the surface, revolutionary underneath. Ordinary people feel the tremors first. Prices rise, merchants hoard goods, and peasants whisper that the gods are angry. In the port cities, foreigners walk the streets under armed escort, their black coats and pale faces drawing curious crowds. Children stare, vendors whisper prayers, and samurai pretend not to stare back. The age of mirrors has begun, Japan seeing itself reflected in something utterly unfamiliar. By the 1860s, the shogunate is a ghost wearing its own armour. It still collects taxes, still issues decrees, but the provinces no longer listen. The slogan, "Revere the Emperor," grows louder, and the imperial court in Kyoto, long irrelevant, suddenly matters again. It is the oldest institution in Japan, and for the first time in centuries it smells power on the wind. The irony is almost elegant. After 250 years of peace, Japan finds itself threatened not by invasion, but by conversation. The world doesn't want to conquer it. It wants to trade, to teach, to measure, and to modernize. The samurai, trained to fight enemies they can see, now face abstractions, economics, diplomacy, technology. For a class raised on certainty, this is unbearable. In Edo Bay, the black ships are gone, but their smoke still hangs in memory. The nation's heartbeat quickens. Steam replaces stillness, and the long, careful performance of Edo begins to stumble. The polite empire of manners has met the impolite reality of the modern world, and neither knows what to do next. Somewhere in the palace, an official sets down his brush, looks at the endless columns of foreign words, and realizes that Japan has spent 2 centuries perfecting silence. Now it must learn how to speak. The year is 1853, and Japan is still pretending the world doesn't exist. The tea is still hot, the garden still raked, and the bureaucracy still confident that if it ignores foreign affairs long enough, they will politely go away. Then, one summer morning in Edo Bay, the horizon darkens. It is not a storm this time, but something far stranger. For, enormous black ships puffing smoke like irritated dragons. The townspeople rush to the shore, staring at the impossible sight. The ships are taller than castles, made of metal and moving without wind. The water trembles beneath them. They carry cannons so large they look like ideas rather than weapons. These are the vessels of Commodore Matthew Perry, arriving from the United States with a letter from his president and the confidence of someone who knows the size of his guns. To the people of Edo, it feels as though the future has arrived uninvited and forgotten to take off its shoes. The shogunate's officials, used to centuries of predictable protocol, struggle to categorize the event. The visitors are not merchants, not monks, not invaders, at least not yet. They are diplomats with gunboats, a combination that does not appear in any manual. The shogun's government reacts with its traditional weapon, a meeting. Courtiers and ministers gather, composing memoranda that are beautifully written and almost completely useless. The question of how to respond to the Americans fills scroll after scroll of exquisite calligraphy. No one knows whether to fight, negotiate, or faint politely. The consensus is to stall, a strategy Japan has always excelled at. Perry, however, is immune to subtlety. He delivers his message: open the country to trade, or the cannons will do it for you. Then he sails away, promising to return for an answer in exactly 1 year. Punctuality, it turns out, can be terrifying. The officials of Edo spend the next 12 months in a state of elegant panic. When Perry returns in 1854, the Tokugawa shogunate signs the Treaty of Kanagawa. It is the first time in 2 centuries that Japan has opened its doors, and it does so reluctantly, like a host forced to greet a guest who has brought his own furniture. The treaty allows American ships to dock for supplies and ensures fair treatment for shipwrecked sailors. Small steps, but the wall has cracked. The news spreads quickly. Within a few years, other Western nations arrive, each with their own treaties and their own cannons. Britain, France, Russia, and the Netherlands all take turns negotiating friendship, a word that in diplomacy often means leverage. The shogunate, once the master of order, finds itself juggling demands written in languages it barely understands. Across the country, samurai begin to argue about what it all means. Some believe Japan must adapt, learn Western science, build modern ships, survive by imitation. Others insist the foreign barbarians must be expelled immediately, preferably with the same enthusiasm used for past rebellions. The slogan of the moment becomes Sonojoy: revere the emperor, expel the barbarians. It's an ambitious policy, as most good slogans are. Domains divide into reformists and loyalists. Scholars debate Western anatomy by candlelight, while swordsmiths sharpen blades for civil war. The air is thick with contradiction, curiosity mixed with outrage, fear mixed with fascination. Newspapers begin to appear, printing rumours faster than the government can suppress them. It's the dawn of public opinion, which, like steam power, cannot be easily put back in the box once released. In Edo, the shogun himself begins to fade into irrelevance. Tokugawa Yasada, who happens to be in charge when the Americans arrive, is more scholar than soldier. Courtiers whisper that he faints easily, which given the circumstances is entirely reasonable. The Bakufu, once invincible, now looks like an elderly man blinking into the sunlight after a long nap. Meanwhile, in distant domains, ambitious leaders begin to move. The Satsuma and Choshu clans in the south start collecting modern weapons and hiring foreign engineers. Samurai who once polished swords now study English verbs. Others, still loyal to old ideals, see this as betrayal. Duels and assassinations return to the streets, proof that nothing wakes up history like paperwork written in 2 languages. The contradictions multiply. Japan bans Christianity while importing Western canons. It teaches Confucian humility while learning to manufacture rifles. It maintains isolation while reading translated physics. The country becomes a paradox in motion, polite on the surface, revolutionary underneath. Ordinary people feel the tremors first. Prices rise, merchants hoard goods, and peasants whisper that the gods are angry. In the port cities, foreigners walk the streets under armed escort, their black coats and pale faces drawing curious crowds. Children stare, vendors whisper prayers, and samurai pretend not to stare back. The age of mirrors has begun, Japan seeing itself reflected in something utterly unfamiliar. By the 1860s, the shogunate is a ghost wearing its own armour. It still collects taxes, still issues decrees, but the provinces no longer listen. The slogan, "Revere the Emperor," grows louder, and the imperial court in Kyoto, long irrelevant, suddenly matters again. It is the oldest institution in Japan, and for the first time in centuries it smells power on the wind. The irony is almost elegant. After 250 years of peace, Japan finds itself threatened not by invasion, but by conversation. The world doesn't want to conquer it. It wants to trade, to teach, to measure, and to modernize. The samurai, trained to fight enemies they can see, now face abstractions: economics, diplomacy, technology. For a class raised on certainty, this is unbearable. In Edo Bay, the black ships are gone, but their smoke still hangs in memory. The nation's heartbeat quickens, steam replaces stillness, and the long, careful performance of Edo begins to stumble. The polite empire of manners has met the impolite reality of the modern world, and neither knows what to do next. Somewhere in the palace, an official sets down his brush, looks at the endless columns of foreign words, and realizes that Japan has spent 2 centuries perfecting silence. Now it must learn how to speak. It is the year 1877, and Japan, newly reborn, is learning to walk in its modern boots. The streets of Tokyo buzz with telegraphs and horse-drawn trams. Students in stiff uniforms recite English phrases beside steam engines they cannot yet explain. The nation feels taller, faster, louder, everything the old samurai world was not. But in the far south, in the province of Satsuma, something ancient is stirring one last time. There, among the mountains and volcanic ash, lives a man named Saigo Takamori. Once a loyal supporter of the Meiji government, he helped build the new army, guide the new emperor, and dismantle the shogunate itself. He was the model of progress, until progress began to feel like betrayal. When the sword was banned, when the stipends vanished, and when foreign advisors started appearing in government halls, Saigo saw not evolution, but erasure. He returns to Satsuma disillusioned but respected. To the samurai there, he's more than a leader. He's a living contradiction, both modern and mythic, the perfect man to give nostalgia one last battle. Around him gather disaffected warriors, teachers, and veterans of older wars. They speak of honor, of loyalty, of the country losing its soul to machines and money. They train quietly in the hills, their armor patched, their rifles old, their resolve fresh. In February 1877, they march north toward Tokyo. It is not rebellion in the modern sense, it is ceremony disguised as war. Some carry matchlock guns from their grandfather's time. Others still wield the swords banned by law. To them, each blade is both weapon and relic. The last argument of a class fading into legend. The government reacts quickly. It now commands a national conscript army, drilled in Western tactics, equipped with modern rifles, and managed by officers who think in timetables. It's a strange mirror. Peasants in uniforms confronting samurai in armour. Progress meeting its own reflection, one side born from discipline, the other from memory. The first clashes come near Kumamoto Castle. Saigo's men surround the fortress, demanding its surrender, but the defenders refuse. For weeks, artillery shells roar through the mountains, echoing off stone walls that once heard only prayers. The rebels fight with courage, but courage cannot reload fast enough. When the smoke clears, the castle still stands, and the old samurai realise that bravery is no longer the winning strategy. As the campaign drags on, the balance shifts. The Imperial Army moves steadily south, its supply lines humming with railways and telegraphs. The rebels retreat deeper into the countryside, each step turning the rebellion from history into legend. They march not to win, but to prove they still exist. The battles become smaller, the reports shorter, the silences longer. Saigo, wounded and weary, understands what's coming. By the time his men make their final stand on the slopes of Shiroyama, there are barely 500 left. They face an imperial army of tens of thousands, equipped with artillery, rifles, and the terrible efficiency of the future. The night before the battle, the rebels light their last fires and share sake under a moon that looks the same as it did in the days of Hideyoshi and Ieyasu. The world has changed, but the sky has not. At dawn, the government troops open fire. The hillside erupts in smoke and flame. Saigo's warriors charge through it, swords raised, their cries swallowed by cannon thunder. The battle lasts only an hour. When it ends, the field is quiet again, covered not in victory but in farewell. According to legend, and Japan loves its legends, Saigo, mortally wounded, sits beneath a tree, thanks his gods, and asks a friend to end his life before capture. Whether true or not, the story becomes the preferred ending. It fits perfectly into the national narrative. Loyalty unbroken, defeat dignified, history concluded with proper manners. The government buries him as a traitor and later rehabilitates him as a hero. Statues rise in his honour. Schoolchildren memorize his name. Even those who fought against him bow before his memory. In Tokyo's Ueno Park, a bronze Saigo stands in hunting clothes, holding a leash for his dog, the perfect symbol of Japan's compromise between myth and modernity. The Satsuma Rebellion costs thousands of lives and nearly bankrupts the Meiji treasury, but it also confirms what everyone already knows: the age of the samurai is over. The rifles of the new army silence the swords of the old one. Trains bring news faster than messengers, and telegraphs make bravery obsolete. The past bows out, as it always does, under the weight of the present. And yet, something of the samurai spirit survives. Not in the battlefield, but in the heart of the new Japan. The values of discipline, loyalty, and quiet endurance are too deeply rooted to die. They simply change uniforms. Former warriors become policemen, teachers, bureaucrats, and industrialists. Their descendants build railways instead of fortresses, manage factories instead of estates. The sword becomes a metaphor, the armour a family heirloom, and Bushidō, the old way of the warrior, becomes moral philosophy for a nation that can no longer afford war. In the villages, old men tell stories of Saigo's last charge to children who have never seen a samurai. They describe how he faced cannons with courage, how he bowed to his fate, and how, in dying, he gave Japan permission to move on. The children listen, wide-eyed, as rain falls softly outside, and the adults smile at the comfort of a story that ends the way it should, with honour intact. The Satsuma Rebellion is not a tragedy. It's a transition. It allows the nation to close the book on feudalism without tearing the pages. Japan steps into modernity with its head held high and its history neatly folded behind it. If you listen carefully to the hills of Kagoshima today, you might still hear it, the faint echo of that final charge, somewhere between thunder and memory. It is the sound of an old world bowing, not broken but complete. And as the smoke fades, a new silence takes hold. Not the peace of submission, but the quiet before invention. The swords are gone, but their reflection remains, shining softly in the steel of locomotives and the glint of factory windows. Japan has lost its warriors, but not its will. The next battles will be fought not with blades, but with ideas. By the end of the 19th century, Japan has remade itself almost beyond recognition. The castles are museums, the armour is costume, and the swords have become collector's items polished for anniversaries. Steamships line the harbours, telegraph wires hum like nervous veins, and schoolchildren march in step beneath the rising sun. The age of the warrior is gone, which paradoxically makes it easier to admire. As it turns out, people love samurai most when there are none left to cause trouble. Nostalgia, like art, is best produced in peacetime, so Japan, newly industrial and increasingly self-conscious, begins to miss what it just discarded. In this mood of longing and reinvention, a new idea takes shape: Bushidō, the way of the warrior, finally codified not by warriors but by scholars, bureaucrats, and moralists. The irony is delicate. The old samurai never needed a written way. Their code was a patchwork of clan rules, Buddhist sermons, and personal habits, more attitude than scripture. But as the country modernizes, the government needs something else: a unifying ethic, a story that explains why discipline and loyalty still matter in a world of railways and budgets. Bushidō becomes the perfect ghost to haunt the new century. Writers and thinkers begin to assemble it piece by piece. They quote Zen monks, Confucian sages, and even a few European philosophers, blending them into a national morality that feels ancient even when freshly printed. The word itself, Bushidō, had existed for centuries but rarely appeared in conversation. Now it becomes a slogan, a brand, a compass. What was once instinct becomes instruction. Among the voices shaping this new myth is Nitobe Inazo, a diplomat educated in the West who publishes Bushidō, the Soul of Japan in 1900. He writes it in English, explaining Japan's samurai values to curious Europeans. In gentle, poetic prose, he presents Bushidō as a universal code of honor: righteousness, courage, benevolence, politeness, sincerity, and self-control. It reads like an ethical manual for gentlemen, and in many ways that's exactly what it becomes. Foreign readers love it. It tells them that Japan's modernization has a moral foundation, that beneath the uniforms and machines beats the heart of a noble tradition. Japanese readers, in turn, take pride in seeing their culture translated into global respectability. It's a feedback loop of admiration, East and West politely applauding each other's ideals. But Bushidō, as Nitobe describes it, is less a historical reality and more a work of literature. The real samurai world had been full of contradictions: loyalty that bordered on opportunism, honor that often required creative accounting. In polishing the myth, the new century smooths away the rough edges. Bushidō becomes perfect precisely because it no longer has to be practiced. Schools adopt it as moral education. Children memorize stories of bravery, selflessness, and duty. Textbooks praise the 47 Ronin as paragons of virtue, conveniently ignoring the part where they disobeyed direct orders. The spirit of the warrior is recast as the spirit of the citizen, loyal not to a lord, but to the emperor and the nation. It is moral evolution by marketing. Factories pick up the rhythm. Workers are told that diligence is modern chivalry, that arriving on time is a kind of battle. Soldiers in the new imperial army recite Bushidō as motivation. Obedience elevated to poetry. Even businessmen borrow its vocabulary. The sword may have vanished, but the discipline remains, reshaped into timetables, uniforms, and national purpose. In this transformation, Bushidō becomes less about death and more about endurance. The willingness to die for honor translates neatly into the willingness to work for progress. It's an ethical rebranding of the samurai spirit, replacing blood with perseverance, battlefields with factories, armor with duty. The result is a nation that feels both modern and ancient, powered by nostalgia. Still, not everyone believes the myth. A few historians point out that Bushidō, as newly described, has very little to do with medieval Japan. They call it an invented tradition, a beautiful story written backward to make the present feel older. But the criticism only strengthens the idea. Myths don't need to be accurate, they just need to be useful, and useful it is. As Japan expands its influence abroad and grows more confident at home, Bushidō provides moral gravity. It reassures a restless nation that its soul hasn't been traded for technology. When railways cut through mountains and electric lights erase the night, Bushidō whispers that the heart of Japan remains pure, even when illuminated by Western bulbs. At the same time, artists and playwrights rediscover the samurai as cultural icons. Theatres revive tales of tragic loyalty. Painters reimagine duels beneath crimson sunsets. The first silent films feature stoic swordsmen who never blink, their honour reflected in the gleam of black and white steel. Audiences weep not for what is happening on screen, but for what has already been lost. In the quiet homes of Tokyo, a generation raised on progress begins collecting what their grandparents threw away: old swords, family crests, scrolls of calligraphy. Antique shops bloom like memory gardens. A dusty helmet in the corner becomes more than decoration. It becomes proof of continuity. And in classrooms across the nation, students stand at attention before portraits of the emperor, reciting the imperial rescript on education, a document soaked in the new Bushidō tone. Be filial to your parents, harmonious to your friends, faithful to your ruler, and ready to serve the state. It sounds noble, and for a while it truly is. A moral code for citizens who no longer need armour, only purpose. But myths are restless creatures. Once created, they grow beyond their authors. What begins as a philosophy of honour will, in the decades ahead, be used to justify both sacrifice and silence. For now, though, in the calm glow of the late Meiji era, Bushidō feels like a bridge, connecting the sword to the factory, the past to the present, and memory to meaning. You can almost hear the sound of that bridge being built, the scrape of calligraphy brushes, the rustle of school uniforms, the echo of drums in distant military academies. The spirit of the samurai has found new armour, made of ink, ideas, and discipline. In that stillness, Japan discovers something it didn't know it had been missing. Not the warrior himself, but the rhythm of conviction. And though the battles are gone, the resolve remains, echoing softly through classrooms, factories, and parades, like a heartbeat learning a new tempo. The age of swords is over, but the sound of steel remains, in language, in loyalty, and in the quiet insistence that even progress should have a soul. You wake now in modern Japan, electric, efficient, and astonishingly polite. The trains run on time with military precision, the neon hums like disciplined fire, and somewhere in all that brightness, the ghosts of the samurai are still bowing. The warriors may be gone, but their outlines remain, faint, elegant, and oddly comfortable in the company of skyscrapers. A century has passed since the Meiji Restoration, and Japan has rewritten itself several times. Wars have come and gone, cities have burned and been rebuilt, yet through every change the idea of the samurai keeps returning. Not as soldiers this time, but as stories, the nation's favourite recurring dream. You see it everywhere. In black and white films of the 1950s, a lone swordsman walks through rain, straw hat tilted, expression unreadable. He's poor, stubborn, possibly doomed, but unfailingly dignified. Audiences watch him and remember virtues they've been told they still possess: restraint, courage, endurance, and a sense of tragic timing. Directors like Akira Kurosawa take these ghosts and give them rhythm. Seven Samurai, Yojimbo, Sanjuro, stories of dusty roads and quiet bravery. The camera lingers on faces, on wind, on the hesitation before a strike. It's action, yes, but also meditation. Western audiences call them samurai movies, though they're really about something quieter: how to live with dignity when the world no longer understands it. The films travel abroad and come back wearing different costumes. In Hollywood, they become cowboy stories. The same silences, the same stubborn heroes, only now with wider hats and fewer vowels. The samurai archetype spreads like wildfire dressed as reflection. Before long, its shadow appears in galaxies far, far away, lightsabers humming like elegant cousins of katanas. Even the future, it seems, needs a past to feel heroic. Back home, Japan modernizes further. The old class hierarchy dissolves into corporate structure. Samurai values, loyalty, hierarchy, discipline migrate seamlessly into the office. The Keisha, or company, becomes the new castle, the salaryman, the new retainer. Each morning, millions of commuters in suits march into trains with the same quiet obedience once seen on ancient roads to Edo. The battles are fought with contracts instead of spears, and promotions replace duels as measures of honour. Corporate culture inherits Bushidō's vocabulary: loyalty to the company, endurance through fatigue, sacrifice for the team. Some see it as noble continuity. Others see it as overworked nostalgia. Either way, the code persists, adapted for fluorescent lighting and air conditioning. When an employee stays late to perfect a report, he is, in a very modern sense, polishing his sword. Meanwhile, the samurai return again in colour, not in armour, but in ink. Manga artists and animators resurrect them for a generation raised on screens instead of scrolls. In these stories, swordsmen fly, duel demons or time travel to high school. Their hair is suspiciously perfect, their honour equally so. The samurai of pop culture is not historical at all. He is emotional truth disguised as fantasy. He fights not for lords or empires, but for friendship, memory, and occasionally good ratings. Tourists too join the revival. In Kyoto, guides dressed in replica armour led visitors through reconstructed castles. Children hold bamboo swords, grinning for photos beside banners of imaginary clans. No one minds the anachronism. In Japan, history has always been more about rhythm than accuracy. The past is a melody, and as long as it's played with respect, it doesn't matter who's conducting. Yet, beneath the spectacle, something sincere remains. The values once wrapped in silk and ceremony still echo in daily gestures. In the way train conductors bow before entering a carriage. In the way workers apologise on behalf of a company. In the way people queue, quietly, even in crisis. Bushidō, now centuries removed from battle, survives as etiquette. Courage disguised as kindness. The sword itself has become a symbol of craftsmanship rather than conquest. Master swordsmiths still forge blades by hand, though few will ever be used. The process takes months, each layer of steel folded hundreds of times until the metal hums with hidden patience. Collectors describe the finished katana as alive. It's hard to argue. In its polished curve, you can see the reflection of an entire civilization learning to balance pride with peace. Modern Japan, in its relentless motion, keeps finding ways to translate that balance. In cinema, the samurai becomes the everyman who refuses corruption. In business, he becomes the diligent worker who endures. In sports, he becomes the athlete who bows to his opponent after losing. The code adapts because the need for dignity never disappears, it just changes uniform. Even the contradictions remain charming. The same country that produces bullet trains also obsesses over tea ceremonies. The same culture that builds robots also writes poems about snowflakes. It's the old equilibrium, steel and silence, speed and stillness, playing on loop through centuries. Sometimes, in Tokyo's neon canyons, you can spot a silhouette that feels older than the city itself. A businessman in the rain, umbrella angled like a blade, eyes fixed ahead, walking with quiet purpose. He doesn't know it, but he's part of a lineage, 1,000 years of people trying to look calm while the world changes around them. Japan has turned its warrior past into a moral language, a reminder that strength without restraint is noise, and restraint without strength is fragility. The samurai spirit lives not in battlefields, but in how a nation still values form as much as function, respect as much as success. The stories continue to evolve. New films, new comics, new games, each retelling the same ancient questions. What is honor? What is duty? And how do you remain human in a world that rewards convenience? Each generation answers differently, but the melody stays familiar. And perhaps that's the real secret of the samurai. Not their armor, not their swords, but their ability to survive as symbols. They outlived their wars by becoming ideals, then outlived their ideals by becoming stories. They are, in a way, Japan's longest-running performance of calm. So tonight, as the neon flickers and the rain falls softly over Tokyo, imagine the reflection of a blade, not drawn, not needed, but remembered. The sound you hear isn't battle, it's memory polishing itself. The sword remains sharp, though mostly in imagination, cutting through time with perfect silence. And that, somehow, is how it all made sense back then.